non-duality, pulling down those divine union, infinite source of love, transmission at all times, everywhere, codes, for the collective, and for the mother. I'll be riffing on that topic a little bit, and what is union with all that is? What does that look like today? What will that look like in the future? And what can we learn from those who brought us to this place in terms of their own experiences of unity, of oneness, in history, and how that's affected where we are today. So I'm just going to drop us into a meditation to start. So whoever feels called can close their eyes. My name's Adi or Onai, and just taking a few moments, maybe putting a hand on our chest and just taking a breath in and noticing that we exist in this moment without grasping onto anything, but just breathing in the sense of being here in this moment. And as we exhale, relaxing the body into the freedom, into a new moment, into the spaciousness, just letting everything drop. On each inhale and exhale, relaxing even more, and just staying conscious, just staying aware, without necessarily being aware of anything in particular, just noticing I am in this moment. And relaxing on the exhales. And just staying conscious, I am again in this moment. There is something conscious, there is something experiencing in this moment. Maybe we're noticing different sensations, maybe there's different sounds. On each exhale, all that dissolves into a brand new moment. But still we are aware, still we are conscious. And let's just begin to inquire into what this consciousness is. What is the sense of being conscious? Not grasping onto the contents of what we're conscious of, into the thoughts, into the sounds, into the sensations. Those are all things we're conscious of. But what happens if we become curious about the sense of consciousness itself? What it is or who it is that is conscious. And what happens if we notice that everything that is currently real is only real because it is something we are experiencing in our consciousness? So maybe we're conscious of something under our butt that we're sitting on. Maybe we're conscious of sounds. Maybe it feels like we're in the desert in California at a festival. What if we just reflected for a moment on the fact that everything that we're conscious of in that experience is only totally dependent and happening inside of our own consciousness? If we were not here, if you were not here, this would not be here. If you were not conscious of this, if this was not happening inside your consciousness, it would not exist. This moment and everything being experienced is totally only here because it's in your consciousness. And what if we expanded that sense of everything that we're experiencing being totally dependent on our consciousness into infinity? What if we wrapped the whole universe in our consciousness and realized that the only way that anything in the universe, in existence, could be known, would be if we were there to verify it in our consciousness. So what if our consciousness was not inside of our body? What if our body was actually inside of our consciousness, along with the whole universe? And then who would that make us? Who would that make you? And can you go outside your consciousness? Can you find a boundary or a barrier to your consciousness? Can you find a place your consciousness ends? Or is it just you here in your consciousness? And then we can just open our eyes, because that's a little trippy, so we can just ground back into physical reality where there's other people seemingly looking at us. And because that can be, how is that for people? Was that kind of weird? Was that kind of scary? What did you, anything that you felt or experienced that sticks out that you want to share? For me, there was a moment that came up that was like, whoa, am I alone here? Is it just me? And then I opened my eyes and I knew intuitively that I was at a festival with other people around me. So, and I was like, okay, cool. So I get to keep talking and I get to interact with other people. But the theme that we're talking about is non-duality, which is, who knows what non-duality means, or who has some sense or definition of that? No separation. Nice. Anyone else? So non-duality means not two. Duality is like two, right? This and that. And often in our mind we have an idea that this and that, or this and that, are two different things. Non-duality says not two. Not separation. No separation. Because, as I said earlier, as we alluded to earlier, everything is in our consciousness. So this is made out of my consciousness. This is made out of my consciousness. It's made out of the universe. This is made out of the universe. This is made out of God. This is made out of God. This is made out of earth. This is made out of earth. So, non-duality is a term that was coined in India, and the Indian term is Advaita Vedanta. And Advaita means not two, and Vedanta means the end of the Vedas. So I'm going to take us on a little bit of a journey from ancient India, actually from the beginning of the illusion of creation, or the apparent creation that we're in, through ancient India, where these people began to be like, holy shit, I'm one with everything. There's no separation. And to where we are now, and reflecting on how this experience that these people have affected humanity, have evolved humanity as a conscious species, and have affected the culture, the spiritual culture that we are benefiting from today, and what it means to potentially realize the same intuitions that these ancient mystics had, but in a modern context, and how that might be different, and how that might be evolving. So, we're going to be talking about non-duality, we're going to talk about enlightenment, basically, meditation, about Tantra. Who likes the word Tantra? We're going to talk about plant medicines, we're going to talk about aliens, we're going to talk about the earth, about the divine feminine, we're going to talk about togetherness, community, we're going to talk about hippies and festivals, and what all these things have in common, and how these things are a part of the evolution and the realization of consciousness that the one is having. So let's start in ancient India. So the Vedas, who's heard of the Vedas? So the Vedas were an old set of books, 1500 BCE, full of all these rituals and mantras and manuals for how to basically bribe gods to help you get to heaven. And they were quite dualistic, actually. There were lots of very superstitious, full of lots of rituals. So we have the Vedas, and then we have the Upanishads, which came around 800 BCE, so about 1,000 years after the Vedas. And the Upanishads were the beginning of the end of the Vedas. So when we say Vedanta, which is the word, and Advaita Vedanta, non-duality, Vedanta means the end of the Vedas. Veda, Anta. So in the Upanishads, which is another sacred book in India, these mystics were going out into the forest and were meditating. And they were having these experiences, and they were sharing them with each other, and they were writing books about them. And in the Upanishads is when non-duality started being talked about and started being written about. And when they started putting an end to these kind of dualistic, superstitious, Vedic formalities that were taking over culture, where people were using spirituality in a very kind of selfish sense, and that was devoid of actual mysticism. And so these mystics were realizing themselves in the forest through meditation, through experimentation, through self-introspection, and started talking about things like this famous Indian quote that goes, Tat Dvam Asi, which means, thou art that being God, or Brahma. So someone started saying, you are that, you are God. Instead of you are praying to these gods for these certain things to take you to heaven, you're already beyond heaven. You're already God. Don't worry about it. So they started saying things like Neti, Neti, which means not this, not this. And Neti, Neti is a kind of meditative technique that's a big part of this ancient culture of non-dual exploration, which is that you notice anything coming up in your consciousness, any thoughts, any feelings, any story, a name, an identity, anything you can be conscious of. You just sit there and you just notice all the things you're conscious of, and you say, Neti, Neti, I am not this, I am not this. I am conscious of the sense of the wind. Because I'm conscious of it, I know I'm not that, because I must be something that is conscious of this object. So I, as a subject, can know what I am based on knowing, first off, what I'm not. And so everything I can be conscious of, even any thought, even any identity, a story of my name, a story of who I am, oh, I'm conscious of it, so it must not be who I am. So I'm not this. And they would do this, neti, 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 until something would happen. And they would pop out, and their mind would go blank, basically. And they would stop identifying with things, stop identifying with any sense of self. I am not my sense of identity. I am not anything I can grasp with my mind. Because anything that my mind can hold, any sense of self, there is still a consciousness that is conscious of that is aware of that. So they would keep going back deep, deep, deep into the source of who am I? Who am I? I am not this, I am not this. And then eventually would get to a point that would feel like I am the infinite transcendent source kind of thing. So this is what they were doing. And then the Buddha came along, and the Buddha was also doing something similar. He was meditating, and he was noticing all the places where his mind would grasp onto a sense of identity, onto a sense of reactivity, onto a sense of separation. And he just sat there and noticed it and was aware of it until him being aware of his awareness dissolved everything inside his awareness, dissolved any grasping onto his awareness, and his awareness was left wide open. But he did not describe it as God. He didn't say, I'm one with God. He actually didn't say much. He just said there's no self. He was like, hey, I looked for a self and there's nothing here. So the Indians, the Hindus would say things like, I am God. the Buddha came along and he just said nothing. People would ask him, is God real? And he would just say nothing. So the idea there is that even God can become a story, a definition, something limited. And Buddha was like, how about you find out for yourself? It's better that you just meditate and sit there and find out if God's real or not. But I'm not going to tell you or talk about it. And this goes in line very much with the Jewish idea. So Judaism brought monism or monotheism to the world at a time where people were worshipping a lot of different pagan gods. And Judaism said there was this revelation where God was like, actually, I'm one. Actually, there's just one. And in Judaism, you cannot make an idol, you cannot make an idea, a form, give a name, give an image to God, because God is beyond all that. It can never be described, it can never be conceived in the mind. So we have Judaism talking about monotheism, which was revolutionary. We have these yogi mystics in India that are saying, you are God, which was also revolutionary. We have Buddha saying, there's no self here that exists, which was also revolutionary, because most people were walking around thinking that they were a separate self. And perhaps, probably people were having these experiences from the beginning of time, but this was when people started to just talk about and formulate these things, as far as we know. And nowadays, I think maybe a lot of us are more familiar with these concepts, but this is like back in the day where people were just figuring out how to talk about and communicate this. And even Jesus, our boy Jesus, was talking about this too. He was like, guys, I and the Father are one. And people had such a lack of reference for what he was talking about that they interpreted that in all kinds of different ways. But I'm just curious, who here has ever had like an experience of like no self or like God self? And who wants to share what that was like? Or like, you can take a moment to like really tune into that and share from that place if that's helpful. But I'm just curious, like what does that mean to you when you hear oneness or you hear like no self? And like if you can relate that to your own experience, what does that bring up? Blank mind, just present, breath, harmony, no idea. Nice. There's like a feeling of intimacy with your environment, where there's like an interdependence. It was before you heard about that.
Before I understood, like, John Lennon song, I am doing
Yeah. I resonate. Who here has had big experiences that opened that up for them at festivals or like on psychedelics at festivals? So we're kind of living in this, like one day people will be giving a talk about us 1,000 years in the future, and they'll be talking about these kids at festivals and transformational gatherings in 2025. That like, you know, that we're a part of this story, the evolution of consciousness, realization. So I'm gonna get to that kind of like what it means and what's going on now and how it relates to back then, but we're just gonna continue along that journey. Thank you guys so much for sharing. It's so amazing that here we are and we're all just like, yeah, like, you know, just some, yeah.
For me, it's like, I call it creationship. And so it's like seeing the moment and like how I can be in like communion with my own love, like in the moment. And I want to like serve that feeling inside of me. That's like, it's like holding space like in a heart that everybody gets to be on together, like dancing together. Yeah.
Hear that? For you, it's like love, and it's creatorship, and it's like engagement and facilitating maybe that experience for those around you, to be in that energy with you. Amazing. Cool. So we're getting into so many different ways of like talking about it that are all connected. But yeah, so this is the thing. So like back in the day, it was pretty like, there's classical non-duality, okay? There's classical non-duality, which is this neti thing, which is that not this, not this, and you really just meditate there and you sit there and you basically try to, it comes a bit from a dualistic perspective actually, the way that it was talked about at least. We can't know what people were experiencing, but the way that non-duality at first was propagated sounded a little dualistic. It was kind of like, we're in Samsara right now, we're in the world of Maya. Who's heard of Maya? Illusion. Oh my god, what up Maya? So Maya was considered illusion in India. It was considered, this reality is Maya, this world we're in. Hi Maya, you are this world. And but Maya was kind of considered, she was kind of like an evil bitch, like the way that they talked about. I disagree. Okay, exactly. There was a lot of blame on Maya, and there was a lot of trying to get away from Maya and trying to wake up out of Maya and get to the non-duality. Maya was non-duality. So it was established, suffering sucks, right? Who wants to suffer? They were like, suffering sucks, and they were like, the root of suffering is the perception of duality. And in the world of duality, in this world, Maya, or Samsara as the Buddhist calls it, there is the wheel of life and death and good and bad and pain and pleasure and all this duality. There's all this push and pull and this sickness and we're suffering, and we're here because we believe in duality. So we want to get the fuck out of here and realize non-duality. We want to realize, I'm not this world, I'm not this body, I'm not this identity, I'm not this shitty person that keeps suffering. I am not this, I am not this, I am not this, I am something infinitely beyond this. So that was like the first kind of conception of non-duality. And it's a little bit dualistic, right? It's a little bit like there's non-duality and then there's duality, which is kind of a duality. So that's classical non-duality. Then we get into basically we'll go into Mahayana Buddhism from here, which is the second turning of Buddhism. The first Buddhism was Theravada, that's the OG, the elders, and they're just like meditating and trying to get the fuck away from Maya, and they're like abandoning everything, renouncing everything, just like going into the forest, like just like meditating until they wake up into nirvana. And then we got the Mahayana Buddhists, which came like a few hundred years after that. And they started talking about this other thing, which was, rather than awakening, well, first there was this big Mahayana piece, which was, it's this legendary quote, and they said in the quote, emptiness is form, and form is emptiness. So in Mahayana, they started talking about emptiness. They started talking about how everything is empty. The Buddha was talking about there's no self. The self, the identity, the separate self, it's empty. There's no wall, there's no substance. There's just like infinite nothingness, basically. Nothingness is just a concept, just a word too. It's something that you can't describe. So then they talked about it as emptiness in Mahayana. They said everything is empty. Like we looked inside, we tried to grab onto anything we could find and go down into its essence, and we found there was just nothing there. It was like I looked for the self, and it was just empty. There was no substance, there was no essence, because everything is interconnected and dependent on everything else. So because if I'm trying to grab onto myself, I simultaneously have to grab onto everything else I'm connected to, and that's infinitely interdependent upon infinite other things, and there's just nothing solid there. And this also came with the Madhyamika philosophy, which is the mind-only philosophy. So the idea here is that everything is empty and everything's only in your mind. So all this is basically a dream inside your mind. It's just a mind, and it's empty in that sense, because mind is just a projection of something unreal. It's a hallucination. It's like a dream. You can have a dream that can feel so real and so juicy, and you wake up and you're like, actually that was empty. That didn't have anything real, substantial in it. It just dissolved into nothingness. So they conceived of everything in that way, but they also said emptiness is form, and form is emptiness. So in that way, form would be like samsara, and emptiness would be like nirvana, the realization of truth. And in that way, they said, actually, they're the same. It's one. So even emptiness is empty. Even emptiness is form. And form is emptiness. So that's a beginning of a non-duality that's more like, actually, this is cool. This is empty too. Like, we don't have to get away from this. Like, this is one with that. Form, emptiness, like, and it became, then this idea of the Bodhisattva came to happen. So in early Buddhism, it was this idea of the Arhat, which is the guy that's becoming enlightened, or the Buddha, the guy that's becoming enlightened for his own self, because he's sick of samsara. He doesn't want to reincarnate because of his delusion of duality anymore. He just wants to get out and be in infinite eternal bliss and oblivion. Like, just, I mean, it's not oblivion necessarily, but it's hard to describe. I wouldn't know. But this is like, you kind of just want to get out of the wheel of samsara, out of life, stop incarnating. The Mahayanas came, and they were like, actually, emptiness is form, form is emptiness, and actually, rather than escaping the wheel of samsara, rather than becoming enlightened and popping out of here for our own benefit, we'd rather hang around and help as many other people become enlightened first, because we actually care a little bit about this place. Like Maya may be like really challenging, or samsara might be really challenging, but we still value the souls that seem to be here, even if they might not be fully real in an absolute sense. Even if these souls might all be empty projections of my imagination, we're still going to play along, because we're all still here in this dream together, and because our compassion is just so big that this is actually more important to us. It's more noble. This is the enlightened movement moving through us, is to serve as many beings as possible and to stay here in samsara as long as it's necessary for everyone to be done with suffering. Because what good is it if I just leave suffering, but other people are still suffering? And so there's some kind of beginning to have an intuition that like maybe this place kind of is real at the same time as it's not real. So it gets a little more like, huh. And so what happens here is, so we get into Tantric Buddhism, we get into Tantra in general. So Tantra is a buzzword here in our communities, and it started off as something quite different from what some people here may be talking about Tantra as in some workshops, I don't know. But the idea of Tantra is the idea that the world, rather than being something we renounce in order to find realization, it's something that we can embrace and utilize. We can find skillful means Skillful means is a big word in Buddhism, in Tantric Buddhism. And it means like, yeah, it might not be the thing. We might not be here for the world. We might not be here, but we can still use it as a means. We can still use it as a means of realization, rather than denying it as an obstacle to realization. How do we skillfully use this world, use the objects, use this apparent dream to help us to wake up, and to help us to wake up in the world, actually, not just out of the world, but to help us to really realize that unity here on earth. So that's where the idea of Tantra starts coming in. The Buddhist Tantrics were happening similar time to the Hindu Tantras were beginning to happen, and in the Hinduism it began with the Shaiva Tantra. So the Shiva people started to go from just like realizing Shiva as their essence, Shiva as God's self, Shiva as transcendent, infinite, I am source. They started to move from that place into Shiva and Shakti together. So they started to say, okay, Shiva, I am, infinite consciousness is all that exists. Everything else is Maya, is an illusion. But what if Maya was actually Shakti? What if Maya was not just some like distracting, annoying, like horrible thing? What if she's actually a goddess? What if she's actually none other than Shiva himself? What if she's actually the mirror, Shiva's mirror? What if she's actually how Shiva gets to know himself and realize himself? What if Shakti, what if this world, what if all of creation was not just a dumb illusion, but was actually a really intelligent design made of love, as a means for the one to recognize itself and to play with itself and to love itself in this duality, in this seeming duality, and it can still be non-dual. It can still be one. Shiva and Shakti can still be Shiva, but Shiva is also Shakti. So this world, what if this world was also divine? So then we start to get into Tantra. This is what Tantra was, and then we start to get into, let's just breathe that in for a sec, because we just... So that feels a little nicer, right? Starting to feel like, okay, that resonates, I like that. And so we also have to acknowledge that a lot of these dudes that were realizing this stuff and talking about this stuff, they were men, right? So there's this very like ascension kind of vibe. This very like Shiva, like fuck Maya, like kind of vibe. And so in Tantra we get into this feminine thing, where we say in the Shaiva Tantra, it's like all of it is a conversation between Shiva and Shakti, and Shiva is infinite consciousness, transcendent, ineffable, emptiness, Buddha nature, whatever you want to call it, self, no self. It's beyond words, it's ineffable. But Shiva actually manifests itself as a cosmic dance, as the Nataraj, for the sake of joy, for the sake of self-expression, for the sake of just wanting to delight in its own potential. And eventually actually out of some cosmic kind of quest to realize and wake up out of itself, to its own nature, through the game of forgetting. So I, as Shiva, am going to put a spell on myself to manifest into many different perspectives and forget who I am. And I'm going to utilize this creative hologram called creation, called the multiverse, to basically give me as many experiences and lessons as I can possibly have, because I'm infinite and I really want to experience infinity as much as possible. It's all good to me, it's all delightful, it's all joy. So I'm going to do that, and then eventually I'll freaking remember who I am after suffering for so many lifetimes, and forgetting and experiencing so much suffering and so much pain, how awesome will it be to start remembering who I am? God, I'm a genius. Oh my God. And so that's like the idea in the Tantric Shaiva system. And the idea here is that creation is Shakti. Shakti means energy. Shakti means power. So there's God, and then there's the power of God to create itself, to express itself, to dance. And we get Shakti, we get the world as a goddess. We get life as a goddess that's not here to curse us into eternal suffering or trap us, but a goddess that's here to help us wake up to who we are and help us to find a sense of unity, help us to find a sense of love and a sense of enlightenment that's actually embodied still. So here we get the idea of a Jivanmukta, which is a little bit different than the idea of an Arahat or some guy that's just going to get enlightened and kind of like be meditating and maybe teaching some people, but then dipping out of the cycle forever. A Jivanmukta is similar to the Bodhisattva, where the Jivanmukta is a soul that is fully awake, but fully alive on earth, fully functioning. Like, I know I'm God, and here I am like partying on earth. I'm not just like chilling in a cave. That's a Jivanmukta. Like, I'm not trying to transcend, I'm trying to be awake and realize the transcendent here on earth. So that's the idea of a Jivanmukta. And so the Buddhists were getting into this Tantra thing, the Hindus were getting into this Tantra thing. This is non-dual Tantra. As opposed to classical Tantra, non-dual Tantra is a lot more like, Jai Ma, like, I love you, Mom. Like, hey, Mom, like praising this creation as goddess, as Shakti. Like this, wow, God, this is God. So here we get into iti. So first we did Neti, which means not this, I am not this, I am not this. Neti, which is important still. It's still a step. Neti, I'm not this, until I am only Shiva. I'm not, even then, I'm not this, till you're the transcendent. Then once you realize that you are not this body, not this world, all this is an illusion, all this is bullshit. Not this. Then you start going, iti, and this. And as the source of all consciousness, I am this too. From the source of consciousness, I am the planets, I am the stars, I am the galaxies, I am the earth, I am the flowers, I am the mountains, I am the trees, I am all these people, I am everything. So it goes from like realizing you're the source, dissociated from all of it, to then as the source, recognizing everything as yourself. Instead of creating that duality of like, I'm God up there, but I'm not God down here. It's like, I'm God and this is all me. I don't have to get away from this. This is already me. Iti. It's a feminine embracing. It's like the mother, and this. Shakti. So we get into the union in Buddhism here of emptiness and compassion. So here it's like, okay, everything's empty. Nothing has real, like, definitive form. But simultaneously, I know for sure from that place of emptiness that there's just infinite compassion flowing in all directions. And there's just a sense of feeling interconnected to everything. Even if everything is just a projection of my mind, there's just like infinite compassion. That's just like honoring that interconnectivity, that there really is no separation. So, okay, I'm trying to cover a lot of ground, so thank you guys for bearing with me. Thanks. Yeah, we'll get to the starseed stuff. Okay, who likes starseed stuff? Who likes aliens? We'll get to that too. So yeah, okay, look at the Aurobindo, yeah? Okay, so we'll talk about Chaitanya first. Okay, so we have Bhakti. Who's heard of Bhakti? Bhakti. kirtan, praising, singing, dancing. This is a lot more tantric. This is saying, so tantra initially was like, okay, we're using mantras and mandalas, and we're going to meditate on them and use symbols and art to realize the source and the expressions of the flowering of infinity, and we're going to use malas and mantras and songs and prayers, and we're going to use these rituals and these candles, and we're going to use all this skillful means, all of this, we're going to use the world, we're going to create a beautiful world and a beautiful spiritual container and practices using whatever method we can have. We'll do this pose while breathing this way, whatever we can do, we're going to do it to help us realize that which is beyond. But we can still use this world. So that's what Tantra was doing, and of course there was like a couple like sexual things that people could do in there. And so it's not just like, oh, Tantra is just sex, and it's not like Tantra is not sex. There is some truth to the thing that the Neo-Tantra people just like ran with, which is that like Tantra is all about sex and everything's about sex. There is some truth there, which is that like, that on the deepest philosophical level, everything is that union of Shiva-Shakti, of divine, ineffable, transcendent nature, creator, and creation, and immanent creation, and the mother. There is that constant union happening, that interplay of like, I am, transcendent, emptiness, and compassion. And so even in the Buddhist tantras, they were like notorious. They have so many pictures of Buddha having sex, like making love. And in those images, Buddha represents compassionate, skillful means. He's the compassionate action, and the woman represents emptiness. And it's the union of emptiness and compassion. So obviously, so it's like this idea that these polar forces of the one are constantly making love. This duality is not dual, it's in union, right? It's that union. And so what better symbol of non-duality, of two seemingly different things actually being one, than finding a whole that fits perfectly with this thing and feeling that oneness, that transcendent experience of losing your sense of self in this greater force that's creation happening through you, and then like realizing that oneness, that creator creating within the play of duality as the one through the manifestation of like creation, and then a baby happens, like just Shiva-Shakti, oneness, creation, like all happening. So there is truth to that, just to give Neo-Tantra some credit. And there's many, and of course these things evolve, and Tantra is the weaving of different practices and schools of thought. So it's not like, oh, there's like, this is the real Tantra, because the people that were creating the Tantras were like channeling this stuff, and then the next dude was just like, oh, I like that, and then he was learning from this other teacher, and he was like, I like that, and he was bringing their stuff together and creating a new Tantra. So Tantra's always been just a collage of like different things that work. So it's okay that we're doing the same thing in this day and age too, but it might be helpful to like know more context. So then we got Chaitanya, who was like, man, you guys are meditating, you guys are contemplating, you guys are practicing this jhana yoga. Jhana yoga, so there's different kinds of yoga. Yoga is union. Jhana yoga is basically the yoga of knowledge. So it's using contemplation, using thinking, using reading to unite with God. Using contemplation, the way that we've been kind of doing right now. We're talking a lot of stuff, and you can think and contemplate and kind of have a realization. That's jhana yoga. Chaitanya was like, damn, like this, you guys are so dry. Like, please, like, it's all about love, baby. Like, it's all about praise. Like, we got to be singing in the streets. We got to be drumming. We got to be. And it's all about relationship, man. What do you mean? Like, you're trying to annihilate yourself? You guys are like, you guys are crazy, man. There's nothing sweeter than love. There's nothing sweeter. Why would I want to be one with Krishna when I can have a relationship with Krishna? So this is what Chaitanya was talking about. And he was saying, actually, this is Bhakti yoga. It's the yoga of devotion, of the heart. And so here he's talking about, like, the way to God is just to praise God, it's to love God, it's to enjoy God, and it's to enjoy the relationship. Like, why would I want to be sugar when I can taste sugar? Right? So so we have the Hare Krishna movement now, like based on this philosophy. So in Hinduism, there's many different kinds of branches of Hinduism. There's a whole non-dual camp, as we've learned about, which is usually more the Shiva people, Shiva-Shakti people. Then we got the dualistic people, which are usually more Krishna, more Vishnu vibes. And they're a little bit more like God is up there and we're like something separate, but like that's how we like it, and it's like it's all good. Like the best thing we can do is be servants of God, and we can acknowledge that God is in everyone to a certain extent, but let's not get it too mixed up, because we really like our sense of separation, because it allows us to really serve God, to be in a relationship with God. And so then we get Sri Aurobindo, who's like, I'll just let it breathe for a sec there, let that land. So who's heard of Sri Aurobindo? Sri Aurobindo's a really cool guy. He's not very known, but I love him. I think he was like one of the, probably the greatest realizers of truth and communicators of truth. And he, okay, actually I'll rewind a little bit before that, just because it's an important context. There's this guy, Ramakrishna. Who's heard of Ramakrishna? So Ramakrishna, what is he known for? What is he famous for, or like cool for? Anyone want to share? I'll go for it if you guys want. He basically was like into trying all the things. He was like, all right, I'll be a Muslim, like let's see. And he would just get dedicated to that path until he found God. And then he was like, all right, I'll be a Shaiva, I'll be a Buddhist, I'll be, you know, a Krishna guy, I'll be all these things. He tried it all, and he was like, guys, it all leads to God. So he was kind of I call him the first New-Ager, because he was trying all this stuff, and he was like, it's all one, baby, you can do it all, it's all good. So Ramakrishna, very special. He was big on unifying all these yogas, the yogas of the mind, jnana yoga, the yogas of the heart, bhakti yoga. And for him, God was Kali, Kalima, the dark mother. So for him, it's like God is the mother. He's like, I've tried all the ways. Believe me, I can go into complete non-duality just using my mind. He could do that. He could do all the ways. And he's like, actually, my favorite way, the best way I recommend, is just to be a child of the mother. So that was what he was all about. He was like, I am the mother. We're one. I'm doing the pujas. I'm doing the tantric rituals, the ceremonies. But in non-dual tantra, you know that you are that which you're praying to. But you're still praying. You're still doing the ritual because it's good. Because we're here on earth and we get to. It feels good. It's like the same way. It's like, I know you're a projection of my consciousness, but it will probably feel good to like give you a flower, you know. So this was like this kind of consciousness that he was in. And then we have Swami Vivkenanda, who was his main student. And Swami Vivkenanda brought yoga to the U.S., brought Indian spirituality. He was the first one in 1983. Who's heard of Swami Vivkenanda? About 3 people. So it's crazy. People don't really know about him, but he was the first one. And they were uniting different kinds of yoga too. There's Raja Yoga, which is the yoga of like internal, like energetic work, pranayama, breath work. There's Hatha Yoga, of course we know, physical posture. There's all these different means to God. And they were like, it's all good, man, let's do it all. Vivekananda brought yoga to the West in 1983, based on Ramakrishna's order. He came to the Chicago Parliament of World Religions, where all the religious leaders from all around the world were meeting up in Chicago in 1983. And Vivekananda took a stand for Hinduism from the Ramakrishna perspective, which was universal pluralism. For them, it's like, whatever you're doing, whatever your path to God is, great. Do that, but just do it all the way. So he came up there and he was like, I am not a Hindu, but on behalf of the Hindu spirit, it's all one, and let's all be together, like in unity, like we're all here for God. Like and everyone, there was a standing ovation. Everyone like got up and they were like, holy shit, this guy is onto something. Like we've never heard anything like this. And he was very respected. So then we have Sri Aurobindo. I'm going to share about Sri Aurobindo because he's really cool. I mean, I'm going to try to speed it up a little bit because I know maybe you guys want to dance and stuff. 5 minutes? 10 minutes? 15 minutes. Okay, cool. That's good. Yeah, okay. So Sri Aurobindo was on the leading edge of the freedom movement for India, because the British had colonized India, and he was like freedom fighter. And then he got accused for a bomb that went off, and he got put in jail for a year. And in jail, Vivekananda, the guy I just talked to you guys about, came to him and downloaded him for 2 weeks straight. He was already dead, Vivekananda. Came to him and downloaded him on yoga for 2 weeks. He was not into spirituality at all. He was into politics. And downloaded him for 2 weeks straight. He would come at the same time and for 2 hours download him. And Aurobindo became a yogi, and he had an experience, a non-dual experience. And he had already had actually some experiences before that with a guru, but he never really thought anything of it. And at first he realized kind of like a very like Buddhist, like emptiness, like neutrality kind of thing, where there was just like silence and there was nothing. And he was just like walking around the world like that. But then in jail he had this experience of like everything is Krishna. The trees are Krishna, the jail cell is Krishna, all the inmates are Krishna, the police are Krishna, and everywhere it's just the Lord, just embracing him and loving him. And he just sat in jail. Cooper likes that. Loves it, actually. And in jail he just became a yogi, and he read the Bhagavad Gita, and he was like, came out and he was like, so I just like spent all my time in there mastering the art of the Bhagavad Gita, mastering the yoga of the Bhagavad Gita, which is the yoga of karma yoga, the yoga of service, of offering your life as a service to God. It's an active. Jivanmukta, who remembers that word from earlier? Bodhisattva. It's this active principle of like, the best way to get to God is just to like give everything you can to the God within everything and everyone. And so, and in the jail cell, God came to him and was like, actually, the most effective way that you can influence the world is to get out of politics. People can take care of that. You need to start to go inwards and actually work on your consciousness, and that's your greatest contribution to India and to humanity. So he came out of the jail cell, like reformed, left politics, and started to go inwards, and started to download all these prophecies about the evolution of consciousness that was happening. And he was Oxford graduated. He had been sent to England as a young child, and so fully mastered the English language, incredibly literate, incredible nerd, just like knew everything about Indian spirituality and general philosophy. And he was like, all right, here's all the good shit from all the old yogas, and here's what they mean in the context of this non-dual realization I'm having. And here's also all the bullshit that we can get away from and forget about, because now it's old school, because we're entering something totally new that no one's seen before. Something totally different is happening. And for him it was all about the divine mother, again, this mother energy. For him, it was an energy, it was a force. And he said the best thing you could do is sit there, call on the mother's force, and let her work on you, and let her move you, and let her transform your consciousness, and let her transform eventually your whole life, your physical existence. And he said that's actually the yoga I'm here for. He called it integral yoga. Integral as in everything gets integrated into yoga. Very tantric. Everything is yoga. Every movement, every dimension of my life is completely one with God and an expression of God in the world through karma yoga, through my service to the world, through my action to the world. Everything is the highest expression of the divine. And he was not at all into making it sound simple. He was not at all into just like, yeah man, just realize you're God. It's all one, man. Just not this, just like. He was like, nah, that's for noobs. That's like, y'all are still like trying to just like realize you're God beyond this world. Like, man, come down to earth. Like, let's manifest God here, like fully, so that no particle, no atom is left unrealized within all of creation. He's like, that's what's really going down. So he was prophesizing this evolution of humanity into a supermental race, he called it. And this was a long time ago. This was 100-something years ago, 120 years ago. And he was talking about the metamorphosis of our whole body, essentially, into light bodies. He was talking about us all. He was talking about not just obliterating ourselves in a oneness beyond this world. he was saying experiencing the bliss of also realizing that, but not just stopping there, also realizing the bliss of holding the paradox of being beyond everything, and also getting to be a soul expressing that oneness uniquely and contributing the most beautiful creative expression that it can to a bunch of other beings doing the same thing, in a sense of transcendent oneness, while we're also like together in a collective unity consciousness, co-creation of infinite energetic harmonics for eternity kind of thing. So, and this was a long time ago. He was also with the mother. They were doing this together. She was 10 minutes. Cool. There was this woman that he was doing all this work with called the mother. And so after he passed, she built a place called Aurobindo. Who's heard of Aurobindo? And it's based on his vision, Aurobindo, Sri Aurobindo. So, yeah, he was really taking it. If Ramakrishna was a New Age, the first New Ager, Aurobindo was the second New Ager. Because that's definitely like, he was really putting out some prophecies for the New Age, for the Golden Age to come. And he was like, it's happening. And they were like, holy shit, my cells are transforming. Like, what is this? And they were like opening up like stargates in consciousness for new levels of consciousness to descend into the physical reality. And for him, it was all about earth. Because how much of these old guys talking about non-duality were really talking about the earth? We do know Buddha, like when he became enlightened, he touched the earth. He was like, let the earth be my witness. But Aurobindo really starts talking about the earth. He's like, I'm not interested in transcending the earth. I'm interested in transforming and awakening earth life fully. Like, let earth be heaven. Emptiness is form. So, let's see where we can go with this. So, theosophy. So there's this Theosophical Society, which were also like, around that time, they were doing similar things where they were like, bringing Buddhism into a more New Age kind of context, and they were like prophesizing about transformation and initiation in more New Age terms. They actually recruited this young guy, J.D. Krishnamurti, when he was a young kid. They found him in India. Who's heard of Krishnamurti? So they found this young Indian kid, and they were like, that's Maitreya. That's the Buddha Messiah. And they groomed him to be the Buddha Messiah. And then when he was old enough to be inaugurated as the official like president of the Theosophical Society and the world teacher, the Messiah of the world, he got up on stage and he was like, all this is bullshit. Everyone find your own path. Don't let anyone tell you what the path is. And everyone was like, how dare he? Like, yeah. So this was like also a cool thing that was happening, and it kind of ties into also what Aurobindo was talking about, where he's like, guys, where we're going, no one has reference for. Like, he tried to map it out. He has a lot of good stuff. I recommend getting into Aurobindo. But he was like, we're going something brand new. So, I guess we can start to fast forward. I mean, we got Ramana Maharshi, who's like one more cool guy that's important to know about, because he just said like, okay, the quickest way to realize yourself is like go in and say, who am I? And find the source of the I. And just hold on to it and see what happens. And so that's a really efficient way, jhana yoga, through the mind. But then Aurobindo was like, yeah, that's cool and all, but like, how do we manifest the most beautiful divine world? You know, so there's like there's two different kind of perspectives. So now we're in 2025, okay? And a lot of kids are at festivals, taking medicine, psychedelics, having these experiences. And for me, I know I was like, I started waking up to this stuff when I was like 15 years old, like meditating in high school. And from the looks of it, since the past 10 years, more and more and more and more, that's just a thing, right? It's becoming more prevalent, more normalized. So all this to say, we're in this kind of prophetic time that a lot of spiritual teachers and traditions have been talking about, where it's like, all right, shit's about to go down. Like, everyone's gonna realize it soon enough. Like, it's happening. Like, the earth, life, matter is awakening to its own divinity and unity. And maybe it's not as simple as like, all right, let's just like go in a cave and meditate and become monastics or try to transcend. Maybe it's like infinitely more rich, and it's just the play of this one infinite potential, seeing the infinite ways that it could continue to express itself in beauty, in this feminine principle. So the difference in, I think, how, and I guess the question is like, how is this expressing itself today through us? That's evolving, that's different, that's new. And I think it really has a lot to do with this divine feminine principle, right? This divine mother principle, which is like, okay, there's that level, the absolute level of like, which is a little more masculine, you can think of it, like transcendent, removed, detached. And then there's the feminine principle, which is like very much animated, very much sensitive, very much like, how do we protect this planet? How do we take care of our nervous systems? How do we psychologically integrate? How do we learn to relate to community well? How do we respect animals? How do we like manifest that spirit horizontally in the circle? So it's not just vertically like ascension. And so Aurobindo was talking about dissension a lot. He was talking about the dissension of consciousness. 5 minutes. So according to like sources that have been feeling really resonant in with my own experiences, there's a woman, Sandra Walter, which I really love her work. And she talks a lot about, she's like one of those like New Earth, Stargate, Starseed keepers, like planetary grid work holders. And she's like, yeah, okay, so there's a harmonic convergence that happened in 1987. I mean, the mother of Sri Aurobindo said in 1969 something significant happened to humanity. She wasn't talking about the hippie movement. She was talking about in her meditation. She was like, consciousness like has landed on Earth. And that was when the hippie movement happened. So then we got the heart, we got the mind, then we got the harmonic convergence in 1987, which is another layer of like, then we got 2012, where it's like, where it's like something unlocks in the cosmic grid work of the divine, finally getting to the point where it's like go time. And the way that Sandra Walter talks about it is like, all right, so we got the sun, we got stars, right? It's like the light of creation. It's like the infinite manifesting itself through light, through these stars. And we're all part of that light. We're all expressions of that light. Everything is dependent on that light. The earth is that light. The earth is that sun. And there's more light coming. There's more light coming. And this light is beyond what we know light to be. This light is infinite love, light, intelligence. This light is God itself, and it has infinite potential for what it wants to manifest. So new levels of light, new levels of energy are coming down into Earth and activating, and the Earth is becoming more like a sun, actually, because there's new levels of light that are coming, and we're all becoming more like suns, actually, and we're all realizing our connection, our interconnectivity on the relative level. As there is an absolute beyond, we're also realizing, okay, so if that oneness is here, then I am one with all these stars, I am one with everything. And there's galactic stuff here. So there's like, then we start to get into, okay, there's new levels of consciousness that we're holding, thanks to all these OGs that were anchoring in new levels of consciousness. They were holding the field, and now the kind of consciousness that we can access thanks to that sense of oneness that they were holding and stabilizing, it's like we're able to penetrate even deeper and even deeper and even deeper into like, okay, so now from this place we can even learn more that they didn't have access to. And now we can even see how this wants to move in this way. When they were busy just like stabilizing the consciousness in lotus position, now it's like, okay, so how does this want to dance like this? And how does this want to love and communicate like this? And how does this want to garden like this? And how, so this like, now that's beginning to awaken, this feminine moving principle, this dancing principle is beginning to awaken in us. And it's nice if we can remember simultaneously, while we're immersed in how real and how much we care about this world, it's nice if we can simultaneously remember that it's also just a dream in our consciousness, but we can have that non-dual sense of paradoxical unity where we don't take it too seriously. So we know it's just a dream, so we're not unnecessarily suffering from the illusion of separation and the illusion of, just believing in anything, any limiting story. But simultaneously, we're also able to acknowledge that this is all a manifestation of something very precious that we get to be a part of, because it's fucking the best thing God would ever want to do. So then we get us here now. And now it's like we're talking about the activation of latent DNA. We're talking about like this kind of stuff happening, like new, like indigo children, crystal children, rainbow children, like new latent, like 99% junk DNA. What is that? Like only using 2% of our brain? Like what is that? Okay, so then it's like this beginning to happen, and it's like new energies coming into planet, and so we're able to realize these old notions of oneness, which is just the fact of reality. And it's becoming like a fundamental truth that's easier to access, throughout humanity. Many people waking up to this now. But actually, like, okay, so what do we do about that, and how do we co-create a better world from that place of the intuition of unity? So we have 1 more minute, but it's all one. So, yeah, there's so much that can be said. A lot of it has to do with like plasma. So plasma, 99.9% of the universe is plasma. And Sandra Walter talks about it as mother plasma. She's like this living force, this Shakti, this energy, it's actually plasma. This is the force that it influences and is influenced by magnetic fields. And let's talk about the heart, talk about the flow of the heart in these energetic electromagnetic fields that we're building. So right now, like the juiciest precipice, I think, of non-duality, of enlightenment, is not just how can I realize no self or oneness, it's like how does that manifest through the expression of my life? And how can I let that knowledge allow me to soften my defenses and open my heart and realize that being human is actually the most divine challenge, and realize that like that's actually the hardest shit, is like to just sit here and be like, so what if all of this is God, and how do I soften my defenses and embrace that my humanity is divine and sacred, so I don't have to transcend my humanity? How do I integrate as we get into the nitty-gritty unconscious territory of all the backlog of ancestral trauma and suppressed shit that we just never had the consciousness to look at? Now that we have this higher consciousness, how do we allow it to come inside and embrace and integrate everything? Everything gets to be welcome as that. And how do we co-create and manifest from that? Integrating these medicines, these shamanic traditions, integrating all the good stuff of the world, celebrating the diversity of the one expressing itself in the rainbow of life and all these different colors and all the different people. Celebrate that oneness and all of life, and simultaneously be open to a new reality, a new energetic. There's new levels of dimensional access that we have to infinitely expansive states of this revelation of ourselves as the one that are available. And it gets to be simpler perhaps than the old yogis had to really work on in order to get that consciousness to kind of start to crack through form. And now it's like, okay, so now it's flowing, and now we're in full force. So now it's like, how do we honor and integrate these ancestral people, these elders, and say thank you and learn from them, and simultaneously be open as we're in this bridge place, as we're in this non-dual liminal space between that and this, between the old and the new, where it's like, okay, we're moving forward, but we're right here, and like we don't know anything, so like letting life be that reflection, letting life be divine, and being human altogether. I think like sitting together, learning to love each other, learning to love ourselves, and learning to manifest and bring that discernment, bring that level of discernment, bringing that inquiry of like, but also like trusting that it's also like already here, reflecting and revealing itself through all of life at the same time. And then like the aliens also are part of that, because there's infinite, it's all made of consciousness, right? Infinite consciousness. So because she asked about aliens, I'll just leave it on the alien note. Yeah, so we're all come from stars, right? And maybe there's a lot of civilizations, as far as my research and experience has shown me, that have already figured this out and have already gone through this like part that we're in right now, and are like thousands, hundreds of thousands of years ahead of us, and they're like waiting on their cousins to like, all right, y'all are remembering that you're all one with us? Cool. Like, okay, well, we can start to like show you guys how to clean up this mess. So, because it's inside, so it's really dependent on the realization within of that unity with the stars and of life, and then as within, so without. So life is a mirror, and really, I guess the final word, I'll leave it on a practical note, is like, there's a lot of collapse of the old world. The old earth is falling apart before our eyes, and we don't want to bypass that, right? We want to acknowledge that there's a lot of people that are not experiencing what we're experiencing and talking about right now. And then when we understand the dynamics of consciousness and the fact that there's already an energetic infrastructure for the highest possible reality that's operating on Earth, we understand that the best thing we can do is attune to that and be vibrational conduits for that, be of service to that higher vision, use our lives for that, to live that, to let that life reverberate through our being, knowing there's no one to save outside of us, because there's no one outside of us. It's all we have to do is wake up ourselves, and of course be useful to this higher vision, but not try to fight an old world, not try to fight duality, not try to be against that bad guy, or that bad guy, or fix that problem that's not right, because that's not how energy works, that's not how creation works, that's not how harmonics evolve. We have to align with and resonate with the harmonics already available to make that frequency, that consciousness already available, even more available to all, because we're already interconnected with all. And the most powerful thing we could do is feel harmony, feel oneness in our system, because everything is so dysregulated within the collective sleep state that any little bit of harmony we can cultivate is radically profound in affecting the collective, just as those few yogis back in the day and their meditations contributed to the powerful realizations that we're getting to access these days. And so not to, and also one last thing is, like, when it comes to choosing your spiritual teachers and who you listen to, I advise not listening to people that come from subtle dualistic frameworks and subtle fear-based frameworks of, like, that's the bad guy and let's be spiritual gung-hos fighting that thing that's wrong, or that, it just, like, it's one thing to talk about oneness and peace and unity and the new earth when it's convenient, but then when you're triggered, like, how can you apply and embody that fully? And I see a lot of teachers out there that haven't fully integrated that and that lose that clarity of unity. Because that's the hardest thing, to hold the heart open and still take responsibility for everything we're experiencing and being triggered by, and say, I'm not here to fight this world, I'm here to be love, and let you all join me if you want. So that's what I pray to myself, to the no self, that I can do and be. And thank you all so much for being here. So if you want to, do I have time to questions? Okay, cool. Any questions or reflections?
What's your name?
How do we connect with you and hear more?
Yeah, my name's Adi. Thank you for asking. Adi Onai. And you can follow me on Instagram. If you have like a notes on Instagram, I'm Source Sovereignty. Or Adi Onai. My name is on the schedule. My website is adionai.com. And you can also talk to me. I also made these really cool little, like, integration workbooks for the festival, if anyone wants, and my information's also on there. Yeah.
They're really awesome.
Yeah. Any other questions?
I have a question. Yeah. So do you speak on podcasts? Like, do you travel around and do this? Like,
This is like my first time doing it on a stage with a mic like this. Thanks,
You
man.
have good microphone practice.
Oh, thank God. Thank you, bro.
You were holding it down here. You had it.
Oh, cool. Thanks, man. Yeah, I've given a talk at Lucidity Festival, rest in peace, like around the fire, like the little circle. I've been on a couple podcasts in the past. It's been a while since I haven't really come out of the, like, I have things to say closet quite, so this is like a step for me in that direction. So I appreciate that reflection. Yeah. Amazing, amazing, thank you. Any other final questions or reflections? Or, yeah.
I would like to share a little secret with me. So I didn't catch your full speech, but I was walking around and putting up flyers for my retreat, and I got sucked into your transmission, and I came and I sat down and you started talking about, like, star lineages, how we're made of stardust, and our star ancestors, basically. And I just thought it was so synchronistic, because the flyer that I went to put up there
And yeah, I wish I had more time to get more into like the New Age Starseed stuff, because that stuff's really fun. But thank you for bringing that in and sharing about your upcoming retreat. Sounds fun. Sounds amazing. Thank you. Cool. Amazing. Any final reflections? Yeah.
Do you have an intention right now, this moment, or this weekend?
Good one. Thank you. I think what came to mind just now is like to loosen up. I'm trying to find a good balance between like seriousness with the path, with the depth of what I'm speaking about, and also I'm glad you asked this question, because it keeps, like, when I come to these festivals and I'm just like with my friends, and like it just keeps being obvious to me that like no matter how much I think I know, and I try to meditate and I try to read about, and like, you know, it's like nothing. I don't know. I just, all of that doesn't matter once it's like you're just here with the homies, and it's like everyone's, you just like, so it's like to take things less seriously in some way and trust that the flow, the spontaneous flow of enjoying being a human is like the most sacred thing, and we don't really have to try hard in the way that in the past people tried really hard. And like maybe there is, like I'm kind of into like exploring, trying hard, you know, not trying hard, because it's kind of, as long as we're trying, we're creating an identity of being a separate seeker that's making effort to find something outside of itself, and it's like actually the relaxation of like, oh, I'm already that. But I guess like leaning more into just like trusting that this, I don't have to figure it out or become anything special in order to be close to what I'm talking about, in order to be the embodiment of it. But maybe it's like the most organic thing when I just like let my inner child play and trust that like all of this flow of human festivaling is the divine, and me just being in a good relationship with it that's not overly heady is like more than enough, because it's all taking care of itself. And it's like, yeah. Does that make sense? Yeah. Cool. It's so humbling. It's like no matter how, it's like being human is the real. So I think it's just to reconnect with my own joy in my inner child's humanity, let it play, and trust that that is enlightened enough naturally. Trust that that already is an expression of God, and yeah, relax a little bit, soften the spiritual ego, the seeker, the guy that needs to figure it out and realize who I am, and you know, and just like be like, oh, it's all, she's taking care of herself, this mother, this life, and I can just be one of the children playing, and the sacred silliness. And I think it's, yeah, the prayer is like to be in connection also with the sincerity of my intention to also be like in the highest possible realization on behalf of the highest possible realization of humanity, like to alleviate as much suffering from all beings. I've really been into the Buddhist kind of Bodhisattva vows lately of like, may all beings like be relieved from suffering. And so my intention really was to be of service to that. And I think it starts with myself, you know, so.
You rocked it. Woo! I hung out because of your sacred silliness. So, you know.
That's why you stay.
Keep it up.
Thanks, man.
I love it.
So yeah, I have these little workbooks here